بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وأحسن الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Inshallah, we'll continue from where we left off, where the Shaykh was talking about religious innovations. On the first of those lessons took place last week. This is the second of those lessons that are related to religious innovation in the religion, and the Shaykh entitled this lesson in his book ظهور البدع في حياة المسلمين والأسباب التي أدت إليها. So basically the Shaykh's entitled this part of his book, or this lesson, regarding the appearance of religious innovations in the life of the Muslims and the reasons and the causes of that. So this is what we will discuss inshallah today. So the Shaykh, he says, ظهور البدع في حياة المسلمين وتحته مسألتان. المسألة الأولى وقت ظهور البدع. So then the Shaykh says that the appearance of religious innovation in the life of a Muslim, or in the life of the Muslims, and the affair, it's under two affairs. He says there's two things to talk about here with regards to the appearance of religious innovation in the lives of the Muslims. He says the first affair is to do with the time of the timeline, with regard to the timeline of religious innovation appearing. He says, قال شيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية رحمه الله واعلم أن عامة البدع المتعلقة بالعلوم والعبادات إنما وقع في الأمة في أواخر الخلفاء الراشدين كما أخبر به النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم حيث قال من يعش منكم فسيرى اختلافا كثيرا فعليكم بسنتي وسنة الخلفاء الراشدين المهديين. وأول بدعة ظهرت بدعة القدر وبدعة الإرجاء وبدعة التشيع والخوارج. ولما حدثت الفرقة بعد مقتل عثمان ظهرت بدعة الحرورية. ثم في أواخر عصر الصحابة حدثت القدرية في آخر عصر ابن عمر وابن عباس وجابر وأمثالهم من الصحابة. وحدثت المرجئة قريبا من ذلك. وأما الجهمية فإنها حدثت في أواخر عصر التابعين بعد موت عمر بن عبد العزيز، وقد روى أنه أنذر بهم. وكان ظهور جهم بخراسان في خلافة هشام بن عبد الملك. So in this paragraph, the Shaykh, he quotes Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, may Allah have mercy upon him, and where he says, know that the generality of religious innovation that's related to which is related to knowledge and worship, he says indeed it occurred in the Ummah, in the Islamic, it was between the Muslims in the Ummah towards the end of the four rightly guided caliphs, as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam informed us, where he said, whoever of you whoever of you who lives will see many differences, So then he said, upon you is my way and the way of the four rightly guided caliphs, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman and Ali, may Allah be pleased with all of them. And then the Shaykh says, the first bid'ah that appeared, or the first religious innovation that appeared, is the innovation of decree, divine decree, al-qadr. And then it was the religious innovation of al-irja, some of the things that the murji'ah, the people who did irja, said. I'll mention it here now, just so we can understand. Things like the iman is only in the heart and it's not on your limbs, so your actions don't count, and other things they said as well. But this is one of the main things they mentioned. The Qadariyah, they said that they basically negated the Qadr of Allah, which is, we know, which is the sixth pillar of our iman. Yeah, iman bil qadri khayrihi wa sharrihi. Yeah, so we believe as part of our faith in Allah Jalla wa Ala, in our faith as being Muslims, we believe in the divine decree of Allah, the good of it and the bad of it. These ones, what they did was they denied it outrightly. The Qadariyah, they denied it outright. They said that we create our own actions and Allah becomes aware of it when we actually do those actions. So that's tantamount to shirk, basically. As the scholars talk about this in more detail in other books. This ends up becoming shirk because you're saying that you're the creator of your own actions. So you made yourself a creator, like the creator, who Allah is the only creator, as we know. But now you're making yourself a creator, which is you're putting yourself at the same level of Allah, if you believe that, and then that takes you out of the fold of Islam. So this is really, really bad religious innovations that take the fold of take the people out of the fold of Islam, whoever believe in them. Then the Shaykh says, he goes on to say, then came about, after the religious innovations of the Qadariyah and the Murji'ah, after that came the religious innovation of the Shia, and then the Khawarij, and so on and so forth, as time went on. And as we know, obviously, when the murder and the killing of Uthman radiallahu anhu was at the hands of the Khawarij, the renegades, the Kharijites. And then after that, one bid'ah came after the next. Then the Shaykh, he goes on to say, then at the end, towards the end of the time of the Sahaba, the Qadariyah, he mentions the Qadariyah again here, came about. Then towards the end of the time of Ibn Umar and Ibn Abbas and Jabir radiallahu anhum came, and their likes, this is when the Qadariyah came about, around their time. Then the Shaykh mentions the Irja, the Murji'ah, they came about a little bit after that point in time. And regarding Jahmiyyah, the Jahmites, and these are the people from the people of philosophical rhetoric, and there's a few other groups as well related to them, but they have similar beliefs and are affected by Aristotelian philosophy, basically the Greek philosophy. They got affected by this. The Jahmiyyah, then they came, the Shaykh says that they came towards the end of the time of the Tabi'een. Yeah, the Tabi'een. And after the passing of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, may Allah have mercy upon him. And the Shaykh mentions here that, as was mentioned or narrated about Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, that he warned against these people and warned of them. Then the appearance of Jahm, or this is related to the Jahmiyyah in Khurasan, in a place obviously around the Persian Peninsula, and this was during the caliphate of Hisham ibn Abdul Malik. Then the Shaykh, he goes on and he says, هذه البدع ظهرت في القرن الثاني والصحابة موجودون وقد أنكروا على أهلها. ثم ظهرت بدعة الاعتزال وحدثت الفتن بين المسلمين وظهر اختلاف الآراء والميل إلى البدء والأهواء وظهرت بدعة التصوف وبدعة البناء على القبور بعد القرون المفضلة. وهكذا كلما تأخر الوقت زادت البدع وتنوعت. So then the Shaykh, he goes on to say that these religious innovations, they appeared in the 2nd century of Islam, and the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they were present, and they disparaged the people who were again involved in it, and they denounced all of this and condemned all of these actions that they were doing, that were of all religious innovations, and they refuted them and its people. Then the Shaykh says, then the religious innovation of Al-I'tizal, the Mu'tazila appeared, and there was a lot of trial and tribulation that occurred between the Muslims because of this. And then appeared a lot of differences in opinions and people leaning towards religious innovation and their desires, and moving away from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sunnah of the 4 rightly guided caliphs, because of the ignorance that appeared and all of these innovations that started appearing. And then the Shaykh says towards the end of this paragraph that he says, as time went on and the further and further away we got from the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the time of the Sahaba, as time went on and we got further away from this focal point, the trials and tribulations increased, the religious innovations increased, and they became numerous. And Al-I'tizal, the Mu'tazila came around, and they basically believed one of their core tenets, probably better to say their core tenets of their beliefs, was believing in that the Quran is created. And obviously, as we know, the correct view is that the Quran is the speech of Allah, and Allah spoke those words, and therefore speech is an attribute, and Allah's attribute, and therefore it's uncreated. This is the view of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah from day one until today, from the very first day till today, and it will always be that, because this goes down to the foundations, as the Shaykh will explain later on, why there's some of the reasons why people fell into these religious innovations. So then the Shaykh continues, he says, تختلف البلدان الإسلامية في ظهور البدء فيها. قال شيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية فإن الأمصار الكبار التي سكنها أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وخرج منها العلم والإيمان 5: الحرمان والعراقان والشام. منها خرج القرآن والحديث والفقه والعبادة وما يتبع ذلك من أمور الإسلام. وخرج من هذه الأمصار بدع أصولية غير المدينة النبوية. فالكوفة خرج منها التشيع والإرجاء وانتشر بعد ذلك في غيرها. والبصرة خرج منها القدر والاعتزال والنسك والفاسد وانتشر بعد ذلك غيرها في غيرها. وشام كان بها النصب والقدر. وأما التجهم فإنما ظهر من ناحية خراسان وهو شر البدع. وكان ظهور البدع بحسب البعد عن الدار النبوية. فلما حدثت الفرقة بعد مقتل عثمان ظهرت بدعة الحرورية. وأما المدينة النبوية فكانت سليمة من ظهور هذه البدع، وإن كان بها من هو مضمر لذلك فكان عندهم مهانا مذموما إذ كان بها قوم من القدرية وغيرهم ولكن كانوا مقهورين ذليلين بخلاف التشيع والإرجاء في الكوفة والاعتزال وبدع النساء بالبصرة والنصب بالشام فإنه كان ظاهرا وقد ثبت في الصحيح أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم الدجال لا يدخلها ولم يزل العلم والإيمان ظاهرا إلى زمن أصحاب مالك وهم من أهل القرن الرابع. I'll stop there for a second. So in this long paragraph the Shaykh he goes on to say here, he says that the different lands and countries of the Muslims they differed in the appearance of religious innovation, and Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah is quoted here saying, he says, for indeed the major lands where the Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam lived and resided, from them, came out from them knowledge and iman, and Islamic knowledge and the correct guidance and everything. And there are 5: Al-Haraman, the two harams, the 2 Iraqs, the Sham. And then the Shaykh says, and from it, the Quran and Hadith and fiqh and worship, all these things came from these lands. They were being taught there, by the Sahaba. It was knowledge of the Quran, and it was knowledge of Hadith and the sciences, etc., and the Quranic sciences and fiqh and worship, the science of worship and everything like this. All of that was coming from there because of the Sahaba that resided there. Then, and the other affairs related to religion. Then from them came religious innovations in the foundations of the religion from all of these places, except the Prophet's city, Al-Madinah and Nabawiyah. That's the only place that remained upright and was free from appearing. So the Shaykh, he says, in Kufa, so which is in Iraq, as we know, which is in Iraq, Al-Kufa, from it came about Shiism, right? And Rafidism and Shiism, and Irja, the Murji'ah, who part of their belief is that Iman is only in the heart, and that's it. If you do any action, doesn't matter, as long as you got Iman in your heart, it's all good. These are some of the crazy things they believe, amongst other things as well. And then there's other groups and types of bid'ah and nasak al-fasid. And then the Shaykh says that they spread these types of bid'ah from there. They spread to other places. So they started off in Kufa. These ones that you mentioned started off in Kufa. They spread elsewhere. Then in Sham you had the bid'ah or the religious innovation of an-nasab and the qadr, an-nasab and al-qadr. And then with regards to Jahmiyyah, well, that came about in Khurasan. And the Shaykh says that is from the worst of the innovations. And then the Shaykh goes on to mention here as well. He says that the appearance of so then he says here with regards to Medina that there was people that were upon other than the Sunnah in terms of their innovated beliefs, but Medina remained safe and secure from it spreading everywhere and it becoming apparent like it did in the other lands. And he says here as well that it was because the Sunnah was strong and Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah was strong there, and they were able to keep a lid on all these people, and people wouldn't come out outrightly and say it, even though they were hiding it inside themselves. They kept it in themselves, but it wouldn't come out. Then the Shaykh goes on to say, he says here that the Qadariyah and other than them, they were obviously in Medina, and also the people that were there that held these innovated beliefs and practices, they were overpowered They didn't have any power to do anything. They were kept in check, basically. With regard, with the except Shiism and Irja in Kufa, and the I'tizal, and the Nisaq that happened in Basra, and Nasab, which is the other one that the Shaykh mentioned, which happened in Sham. Except these, they were there, they were spreading around in all the different lands other than Medina. They were apparent out in the open. They were out in the open. And then the Shaykh he mentions a hadith here of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that where he mentioned that the Dajjal won't enter Medina. I won't enter Medina, and that the ilm will continue and iman will be correct knowledge and iman, faith, will continue to be apparent there. And it says here, to the time of the companions of Malik, may Allah, Imam Malik, and they are from the people of the 4th century. Then the Shaykh goes on to say, he says, فَأَمَّا الْأُصُورَ الثَّلَاثَةَ الْمُفَضَّلَةَ فَلَمْ يَكُنْ فِيهَا بِالْمَدِينَةِ النَّبَوِيَّةِ بِدْعَةٌ ظَاهِرَةٌ الْبَتَّةٌ وَلَا خَرَجَ مِنْهَا بِدْعَةٌ في أصول الدين البتة كما خرج من سائر الأمصار. So then the Shaykh says, just summarizes what he said earlier as well. He says here that during the three early the first 3 generations, then in Medina, specifically in the Prophet's city, there's nothing apparent of bid'ah. There was no apparent bid'ah going on and being practiced and being told and being spread. And nothing of the likes came out from there with regard to the foundations of the religion, as it sadly happened in the other lands that the Shaykh mentioned, in the other Muslim lands at that time. Then the Shaykh moves on to the next section in this lesson, and he says al-asbab allati uddat ila dhuhur al-bid'. So some of the reasons that led to the religious innovations, appearing and becoming apparent, and them coming about. He said, مما لا شك فيه أن الائتسام بالكتاب والسنة فيه منجاتي أو منجاتي من الوقوع في البدع والضلال. قال تعالى وأن هذا صراطي مستقيما فاتبعوه ولا تتبعوا السبل فتفرق بكم عن سبيلي. And that's from Surah Al-An'am, verse 153. So if we have a look at the meanings of that, we'll see that what's being mentioned in relation to what the Shaykh's been discussing so far, where Allah says, and verily this, i.e. Allah's commandments mentioned in the above 2 verses, 151 and 152, is my straight path, so follow it, and follow not other paths, for they will separate you away from his path. This he has ordained for you, that you may become al-muttaqun, the pious. See verse chapter 2 verse 2. That's the full translation of that. Then the Shaykh, he says, وَقَدْ وَضَحَ ذَلِكَ النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فيما رواه ابن مسعود رضي الله عنه قال خط لنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم خطا فقال هذا سبيل الله، ثم خط خطوطا عن يمينه وعن شماله، ثم قال وهذه سبل على كل سبيل منها شيطان يدعو إليه، ثم تلا وأن هذا صراطي مستقيما فاتبعوه ولا تتبعوا السبل فتفرق بكم عن سبيله ذلكم وصاكم به لعلكم تتقون. فمن أعرض عن الكتاب وسنتي تنازعته الطرق المضلة والبدع المحدثة. So then the Shaykh says here that indeed there's no doubt that holding tight onto the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that that the ones who do that, they're saved from falling into religious innovations and misguidance. And then we read the translation of the verse that we read in Arabic. Then the Shaykh, he mentions also the clarification of this from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ drew a line for them, like in the sand, drew a line for them. And then he said, he drew one line, long straight line, and he said, this is Allah's path. Then he drew other lines going from the on the right hand side and on the left that were parting away from this main line. He said, and these are the other ways. Upon every one of these paths is a shaitan at the end of it calling you to it. Then he recited the verse that we recited a few moments ago with regard to what he was saying. So then the Shaykh says, so whoever turns away from the Quran and the Sunnah and takes another path and goes away from that and starts doing other things that are not from it, then he's misguided, he's a misguider, and is upon a religious innovation that are newly invented matters in the religion. And we know the situation with regard to that, as the Shaykh has mentioned to us. Then the Shaykh, he goes on to say to us, فَالْأَسْبَابُ الَّتِي أُدَّتْ إِلَى ظُهُورِ الْبِدْعِ تَتَلَخَّصُ فِي الْأُمُورِ التَّالِيَةِ. So now the Shaykh is going to explain to us some of the reasons why these religious innovations appear. What are the reasons behind it? And it's important to know them to help us understand why they come about, and at the same time to help us stay away from them. Then the Shaykh, he says, what are some of the reasons? He says, الجهل بأحكام الدين اتباع الهوى التعصب للآراء والأشخاص التشبه بالكفار وتقليدهم ونتناول هذه الأسباب بشيء من التفصيل. He says, so what are those reasons? He summarizes it first. He says, ignorance with the rulings of the religion. So ignorance of the rulings of the religion, following desires, being fanatic, and a fanaticism towards opinions and people, mimicking, I'd say, I think that's an appropriate word, mimicking or copying the kuffar and blind following them in their customs. And the Shaykh says that we'll look at these that is mentioned here with some details of each and reasons behind it, evidences and other things. So he'll mention this and break it down further. So he starts off with the first thing he mentioned in the above paragraph. He says, Al-Jahlu bi ahkam ad-din. So ignorance with regard to the rulings of the religion. What does he say? He says, كل ما امتد الزمن وبعد الناس عن آثار الرسالة قل العلم وفشل الجهل كما أخبر بذلك النبي بقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم من يعش منكم فسيرى اختلافا كثيرا وقوله إن الله لا يقبض العلم انتزاعا ينتزعه من العباد ولكن يقبض العلم بقبض العلماء حتى إذا لم يبقى عالما اتخذ الناس رؤوسا جهالا فسئلوا فأفتوا بغير علم فضلوا وأضلوا فلا يقاوم البدع إلا العلم والعلماء فإذا فقد العلم والعلماء أتيحت الفرصة للبدع أن تظهر وتنتشر ولأهلها أن ينشطوا. So then the Shaykh, he says here with regard to understanding the rules of the deen, the legislation, the rules of the deen, the laws, the rules, the foundations. He says that as each time we go further in time, as in time itself, each time we go further away from the first generation of Islam, or the three virtuous generations of Islam, the further we go away from that focal point, basically ilm is reduced and ignorance spreads, and it gets worse. It's like it gets worse each time. As time goes on, it gets worse and worse and worse. Knowledge decreases, ignorance increases. As he says, as the Prophet ﷺ mentioned to us, where this hadith was, if you remember, this hadith was mentioned earlier in the lesson. The Shaykh, he said, he quotes where the Prophet ﷺ said, "Whoever of you lives is going to see a lot of differing." And then he said, also in another hadith, "Verily Allah, or indeed Allah, does not withhold knowledge from his servants, from his slaves, except by taking it away, Allah doesn't take away knowledge like that, just taking it away like that, but he takes it away from his slaves by taking away the scholars. He's taking away the scholars one by one, where there's no true people of knowledge left, or there's a lesser number, and then ignorance spreads. So this hadith tells us about this. Then towards the end of this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, what does he say? He says that up until a point where there isn't an alim, there isn't a scholar left, and the people take ignorant people as their heads, and they ask them, and those people that they've taken are ignorant and have no knowledge, and they pass edicts and pass rulings and judgments without knowledge. So they are misguided themselves, and they misguide the others. And then the Shaykh says that the only thing that resists, is a resistance to religious innovation, is knowledge and the scholars. So if knowledge is lost and the ulama are lost, then you'll get is a situation where chances or opportunities become available for innovations to appear and spread amongst the people, and you'll see the people of those innovations, the people of innovation, with energy and active in spreading their false beliefs. Then the Shaykh goes into the second thing he mentioned with regards to some of the reasons why these religious innovations appear within the religion, and why. He says, following desires. So following our desires. He says, "Man a'rada anil kitabi wa sunnati ittaba hawahu, kama qala ta'ala, fa in lam yastajibu laka fa'lam annama yattabi'una ahwa'ahum, wa man adallu mimman ittaba hawahu bighayri hudan min Allah." That's from Surah Al-Qasas, verse 50. وقال تعالى أفرأيت من اتخذ إلهه هواه وأضله الله على علم وختم على سمعه وقلبه وجعل على بصره غشاوة فمن يهديه من بعد الله. And that's from Surah Al-Jathiyah, verse 23. والبدع إنما هي نسيج الهوى المتبع. So then the Shaykh, he says here that whoever turns away from the book and the Sunnah, the Quran and the Sunnah, has followed his desires. As Allah Ta'ala said in these two ayahs that we read. So let's have a look at, let's go to the meanings. The first verse was from Surah Al-Qasas, verse 50. So let's have a look at that first. But if they answer you, no, I do not believe in your doctrine of Islamic monotheism, nor follow you, then know that they only follow their own lusts. And who is more astray than one who follows his own lusts without guidance from Allah? Verily, Allah guides not the people who are zalimun, wrongdoers, disobedient to Allah, and polytheists. Then the second verse mentioned by the Shaykh here is from Surah Al-Jathiyah, verse 23. So let's have a look at that too. Have you seen him who takes his own lust, vain desires, as his ilah, God, and Allah, knowing him as such, left him astray and sealed his hearing and his heart and put a cover on his sight? Who then will guide him after Allah? Will you not then remember? So this is clear for anyone to understand. Then the Shaykh continues, he says, the other reason, at-ta'assub lil-ara'i wal-rijal, having fanaticism for certain opinions and men and people and their opinions. What does he mean by that? He says, يحول بين المرء واتباع الدليل معرفة الحق. قال تعالى: وإذا قيل لهم اتبعوا ما أنزل الله قالوا بل نتبع ما ألفينا عليه آباءنا. Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 170. وهذا هو الشأن في المتعصبين اليوم من بعض أتباع المذاهب الصوفية والقبوريين إذا دعوا إلى اتباع الكتاب والسنة ونبذ ما هم عليه مما يخالفهما احتجوا بمذاهبهم ومشايخهم أو مشايخهم وآبائهم وأجدادهم. So then the Shaykh, he mentions here that basically what stands in the way of some people or groups of people are the fanaticism that they have for certain opinions or people. And the Shaykh, he gives some examples. For example, like you'll see people, they won't move off or budge off what their parents were upon or what their Shaykh was upon, if it was like from the Sufiya, from the Sufis, or just being staunch upon a certain madhab when evidence comes from the Quran and Sunnah, for example, and they'll reject the Quran and Sunnah or the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ for somebody's opinion. Which this is one of the reasons, and a big one, as the Shaykh mentions here, for people to fall into innovation and not be guided. And then the Shaykh, he mentions verse 170 from Surah Al-Baqarah. So let's have a look at it. When it is said to them, follow what Allah sent down, they say, nay, we shall follow what we found our fathers following. Would they do that, even though their fathers did not understand anything, nor were they guided? And this is the thing also, like where people say, for example, I'm Hanafi, or I'm this, or I'm that, and that's it, I'm sticking to it. That is a dangerous situation to be in, because if some evidence comes to you from the Quran and Sunnah, from the Sunnah itself as well, and it's authentic, you have no reason not to accept it as a Muslim. If you truly love Allah, and if you truly love the Prophet ﷺ, you have no issue following it. You should have no issue following it. So then the Shaykh moves on to the next point, and that is at-tashabbuhu bil-kuffar, imitating the kuffar. I said mimicking earlier on, but I think imitation is a better word. So imitation or imitating or copying the disbelievers. He says, هو من أشد ما يوقع في البدع كما في حديث أبي واقد الليثي قال خرجنا مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إلى حنين ونحن حدثاء أهد بكفر حدثاء أهد بكفر وللمشركين سدرة يأكفون عندها أو يأكفون عندها وينوطون بها أصلحتهم يقال لها ذات أنواط فمررنا بسدرة فقلنا يا رسول الله اجعل لنا ذات أنواط كما لهم ذات أنواط فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الله أكبر إنها السنن قلتم والذي نفسي بيده كما قالت بنو إسرائيل لموسى اجعل لنا إله كما لهم آلهة قال إنكم قوم تجهلون Surah Al-A'raf verse 138 لا تركبن سنن من قبلكم. Then he continues, the Shaykh continues and he says, after quoting the hadith, he says, ففي هذا الحديث أن التشبيه بالكفار هو الذي حمل بني إسرائيل أن يطلبوا هذا الطلب القبيح وهو أن يجعل لهم آلهة أو آلهة يعبدونها وهو الذي حمل بعض أصحاب محمد أن يسألوه أن يجعل لهم شجرة يتبركون بها من دون الله وهذا نفس الواقع اليوم فإن غالب الناس من المسلمين قلدوا الكفار في عمل البدع والشركيات كأعياد الموالد وإقامة الأيام والأسابيع لأعمال المخصصة والاحتفال بالمناسبات الدينية والذكريات وإقامة التماثيل والنصب التذكارية وإقامة المآثم وبدء الجنائز والبناء للقبور وغير ذلك وإقامة المآتم وإقامة المآتم. So what does the Shaykh say here? He says that imitating the kuffar is from one of the severest forms of falling into religious innovation and is very dangerous. He says, as mentioned in the hadith of Abi Waqid al-Laythi, where he said that we went out with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Hunain, a place Hunain, and we were talking about at the time of Jahiliyyah when they were upon when the people were upon disbelief before the message, and regarding the polytheists, that the polytheists, the mushrikeen, they had a tree. They had a particular tree where they used to sit by, and they used to hang their swords, their weapons, what have you, on the branches, and they used to sit there and they used to worship and they used to try to seek blessings from this tree that they believed would strengthen them in battle and strengthen their weapons and strengthen them and would enable them to win a battle. Yeah. So they passed by this tree and they said, "O Messenger of Allah, make for us that anwat, that tree that they hung their weapons on, that they have, make one for us." Then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he replied, he said, "Allah is the greatest. Indeed, that is their ways, as in is their ways." And then he said, "Whose hand my soul is in, Allah, whose hand is my soul is in, this is what Bani Israel said to Musa." And then he quoted the ayah from the Quran regarding this, which we read from Surah Al-A'raf. Let's go and have a look. Verse 137, Surah Al-A'raf. We'll read the whole verse, inshallah. "And we brought the children of Israel with safety across the sea, and they came upon a people devoted to some of their idols in worship. They said, 'O Moses, make for us a god as they have gods.' He said, 'Verily you are a people who know not the majesty and greatness of Allah and what is obligatory upon you, i.e. to worship none but Allah alone, the one and the only God of all that exists.'" And also the Shaykh mentions and quotes here what the Prophet ﷺ said, that you'll follow the ways of the people before you. That the Muslims will follow the way of the people before them in some of their practices. Then the Shaykh goes on to say that in this hadith, imitating the disbelievers, it is what caused Bani Israel to request this despicable and nasty thing, as in that was which was shirk. And what was it? Just to summarize and go back to that again, it was to make for them a god or gods that they could worship. And we clearly know this is shirk. Yeah, it's haram. It's shirk. It's the worst sin that you could commit. And it takes you out of the fold of Islam. And this is what also caused some of the companions at that time, because they didn't know, the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, to ask regarding that tree. Yeah, and to seek blessings in that. But obviously, then the Prophet ﷺ taught them that no, that is haram. It's not allowed. Yeah, and then told them that ayah, and they would have understood exactly what he meant when he said that. And then the Shaykh says, and this is the thing, what happens today. This is what happens today in reality. He says that most of the people, most of the Muslims, they blind follow the disbelievers in their deeds, their actions, and their innovations, practices, and in their types of shirk that they do. He gives some examples. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just some examples for us to acquaint ourselves with. He says, like the celebrations, like birthday celebrations, establishing certain days as celebrations are not from Islam. Certain weeks in the year, doing certain actions, specific actions, certain parties and gatherings, depending on situations that are related to religion, and also obviously remember like anniversaries and things like this, establishing statues and idols of varying types, and saying that it's what we they're just remembrances, keepsake, things like that. Establishing gatherings when someone's died, ma'atim, yeah, and gathering people, as we all know, that's bid'ah. Gathering people specifically for that, al-ma'atim, and the religious innovations related also to janaiz, funeral processions, and building upon and raising the graves of people. And other than that have been mentioned in this book, and that have been mentioned in other books that we've gone through and that you may have read yourselves. So we'll wrap up here, inshallah. This finishes and concludes the lesson, and we'll continue next week, which follows on from where we've left off, basically. So inshallah, we'll stop there, and we'll continue next week at the same time. Lessons are on Thursday now at 8:30 for the time being. If there's any updates, I'll post it in the group, or I'll let you know in the lesson, inshallah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta wa astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.